Made with spoken. What Remains Unreturned by Morgan Sterling. Digital narration performed by multiple digital voices.
Chapter 1. The Shape of Arrival. The exchange dome rose from the plain without ceremony. No banners, no thresholds meant to impress. Pale composite panels curved into one another in smooth continuity, surfaces unmarked by time or ornament. It carried the temporary confidence of something designed to be dismantled cleanly. Useful, efficient, and unconcerned with what remained once it was gone. Marrow stood at the base of the access ramp with the rest of the cohort, boots aligned against the same narrow band of floor light. The strip brightened and dimmed in slow increments, a timing guide rather than an invitation. Her badge warmed against the inside of her wrist as its internal status cycled. No one spoke. The silence had structure to it, the kind that came from orientation briefings and enforced waiting rather than nerves. She told herself that was good. This wasn't tourism. Not really. She'd said that during intake interviews, during the ethics screening, during the final approval call that congratulated her on being selected. She believed it when she said it. The Calder Bridge wasn't a spectacle. It was intervention. It was presence. It was the chance to do something useful with a life that had otherwise passed cleanly, comfortably, without friction. A human guide stood at the foot of the ramp, posture relaxed, uniform tailored to precision rather than display. Their gaze moved across the cohort with professional neutrality, tracking wristbands rather than faces.
Proceed when your identifier pulses,
they said.
You are not permitted to enter any corridor without an active line. If your band darkens, you stop where you are.
Marrow glanced down. The band remained dark, status icons steady and unreadable. She drew in a breath through her nose and counted until the air lost its edge. The ramp rose in a shallow arc, disappearing into the body of the structure. Nothing about it suggested danger. Nothing suggested welcome either. The band pulsed. Marrow stepped forward. The raw amp responded beneath her weight with a firmness that wasn't metal, not quite stone either. The surface resisted pressure without vibration, tuned for density rather than hardness. Heat traveled up through the soles of her boots and settled there, constant and neutral. A thin line of light unfurled ahead of her, extending only as far as the ramp's midpoint, then pausing until her pace matched its timing. Inside, the dome narrowed into a lens-shaped corridor. Clear partitions segmented the space not for visibility, but for control. Staff moved behind the glass with practiced economy, eyes fixed on scrolling data rather than faces. Emitters along the ceiling flickered at measured intervals, adjusting atmospheric pressure in increments too fine to feel individually but unmistakable in aggregate. The air carried the faint bite of sterilization layered over something warmer, electrical. Her wristband pulsed again. A gate opened in a smooth, petaled motion. As she stepped through, the air shifted. Not colder, cleaner. Pressure brushed her skin in a uniform pass, light skimming along the edges of her body, mapping contours with clinical precision. Her breath caught once, then leveled. Decontamination, she thought, or calibration. The language varied depending on who was explaining it. Beyond the threshold, a chamber opened into a ring of identical kiosks. Matte surfaces. Dormant interfaces. Each kiosk sat on a subtly raised platform, spacing bodies without visible barriers. Above them, a central display scrolled names as cohort members were called forward in sequence. Her name appeared. Marrow stepped onto the assigned platform. The kiosk brightened beneath her hand, responding to warmth and proximity rather than touch alone.
Identity confirmation,
the system prompted. She placed her palm flat. A soft resistance met her skin pressure without force, containment without grip. The display populated with her image captured seconds earlier, overlaid with biometric schematics she recognized only in theory.
Confirm.
Her voice carried easily in the chamber.
confirm.
The interface shifted. Text unfolded in careful blocks, each line anchored to a verification marker that pulsed once before locking. Consent lattice, voluntary participation acknowledged. Transfer duration 6 standard cycle. Host compensation, verify. Risk classification, minimal. She scrolled. Each section ended the same way with language that reassured without specifying, with space for her affirmation. The phrasing was consistent with every briefing she'd received. Respectful, neutral, built on the assumption that understanding preceded agreement. She read every line anyway. A prompt blinked at the bottom of the screen. Do you have questions? For a moment, she considered asking what re-entry felt like. The thought hovered, then drifted. Her thumb pressed the confirmation field. The kiosk dimmed. A soft chime marked completion. Her wristband pulsed in response, status shifting from intake to transfer ready. A staff member approached from her left. The woman wore a tailored black uniform with no visible insignia, fabric structured like high fashion stripped of ornament. A precise bob framed her face, dark hair cut to remove distraction. Her expression held no edge of anticipation or awe, only the practiced neutrality of someone whose workday included miracles.
Marrow,
she said, already turning.
transfer preparation is ready. You will remain escorted until you are cleared for internal movement. If your band flashes amber, you stop immediately and wait for instruction.
They moved down a side corridor that narrowed just enough to pull attention forward. The walls reflected light without reflection, swallowing shadow and echo. With each step, the floor subtly reconfigured beneath Marrow's feet, smoothing gate discrepancies before they could register as imbalance. Another door opened. The waiting area looked designed for patience without stakes. Seating arranged in small, deliberate clusters. Low tables without objects. No visible screens. The ceiling height shifted by inches from section to section, preventing any one posture from becoming comfortable for too long. A man reclined in one of the chairs, ankle crossed over his knee, wristband glinting. He glanced up and smiled.
First time?
She nodded.
You'll never go back. And I mean that in the best way,
he said, not conspiratorial, certain. He gestured toward the empty seat across from him. She took it, posture upright, hands folded together.
Jonah,
he said, reaching forward to shake her hand.
Third run.
His face was unmarked by strain, someone who slept well. He looked down at her name tag.
Marrow, you look like someone who read the terms.
He tapped his wristband. A corner of her mouth lifted.
They make them readable for a reason,
he continued.
Keeps everything clean. You're lucky to be on this rotation.
Lucky,
I didn't expect it to feel like this,
she said. The quiet pressed against her more than the anticipation had. Jonah shrugged.
Calm sells trust. You'll see.
The air shifted. Not visibly. Something in the room adjusted, like a held breath released. A status indicator along the far wall changed from standby to active. A man entered through the far door. Dr. Calder carried momentum rather than speed. His coat hung open, pockets weighted with tools rather than credentials. Faint implant lines traced along his wrists, disappearing beneath the fabric. He smiled as if the room had been waiting for him, and before he spoke, his gaze flicked to the status panel by the doorway, the one that scrolled clearance states and extraction windows. He read it the way someone read weather.
Good,
he said.
Everyone's here.
The cohort gathered without instruction. Jonah straightened. Marrow rose with the others.
You're about to do something that matters,
Calder said.
I know that sounds rehearsed. It isn't.
He paced once, hands shaping the space as he spoke. His fingers tapped a small ring at his right hand, an absent habit, like checking an anchor.
The Calder Bridge exists because empathy shouldn't be theoretical. Every safeguard you'll encounter was developed with Clessari consent. This isn't extraction, it's exchange. Your guests, nothing more.
A hand lifted.
Side effects?
Calder nodded, already aligned with the question.
Disorientation during early cycles. Emotional overlap. Sensory compression.
His tone softened.
Temporary. We monitor everything.
A technician near the wall stilled for a fraction of a second before resuming her posture. Calder's eyes did not go to the technician. They went, briefly, to the small red column on the display that marked outliers, then away again.
You'll be guided,
Calder added.
supported, and when you return, you will carry understanding that can't be simulated.
Prep accelerated after that. Marrow changed into transfer attire, fabric thin and responsive, designed for mapping rather than comfort. Contacts cooled her temples. A collar settled at the base of her neck, weightless until it wasn't. A pressure indicator lighting once and then dimming. The technician Lena Ortiz, according to her name tag, worked with steady precision.
Any implants?
No.
History of dissociation?
No.
Claustrophobia?
Marrow shook her head. Lena paused, fingers resting on the collar interface.
Re-entry can feel compressed. Focus on what stays. If you experience contact that isn't ambient, you report it. Presence is one thing. Channel contact is another.
Marrow blinked.
Channel?
Lena's expression didn't change.
Private direct signal. The dome logs it. Don't worry about it. You're not here for that.
The cradle awaited beyond the prep bay. Curved, enclosed without walls. It adjusted beneath her as she lay back, contours aligning to her spine in measured increments. Above her, the ceiling slid, not closing, aligning. Calder's voice filtered through the system.
We'll count you across.
The hum deepened, pressure rather than sound.
3,
Her breath shortened.
2,
Light narrowed.
1.
The world folded. There was no absence, only motion without direction. A pull that rearranged rather than tore. Then wait. Air entered lungs that did not recognize it. Her chest expanded too far, too wide. Muscles responded out of sequence. The floor pressed up through joints that held unfamiliar ratios. Hands longer than expected gripped the cradle's edge. The surface responded to pressure, not texture. Marrow pushed upright. The room held depth where it shouldn't. Color carried information. Space pressed inward, not visually but internally, like proximity without bodies. A presence brushed her awareness. Not voices, not words. An ambient field of attention, layered and constant like standing inside a crowd that never went silent. This was the resonant world. An atmosphere made sentient by proximity. A figure stood nearby, Clessari, their posture balanced, mirrored eyes set along the temples catching light at different angles.
Slow.
They said. The word arrived through sound and something steadier beneath it.
Balance first.
Her legs adjusted. Her center of gravity shifted. The floor accepted her weight with a muted give. They extended an arm. Not touching. Close enough to anchor.
Good. Follow.
They exited the dome together. The human geometry fell away. Structures curved rather than cornered. Pathways branched without signage. Living surfaces responded to proximity. Subtle shifts of tone and temperature guiding movement. The psychic field thickened as they walked. Not louder, denser. Minds brushed hers without intent. Awareness slid past like current. It carried warmth, texture, and tonal variation that made silence feel incomplete. Her stride lengthened, breath evened.
This feels...
She searched.
Continuous.
The escort supplied. They passed a group gathered around a shallow basin. The surface within rippled, not liquid. Not solid, responding to the rhythm of shared focus. The field around them tightened into cohesion. Marrow slowed. A flicker of discomfort rippled outward. One of the Clessari angled away, mirrored eyes tightening. The escort adjusted course, extending their arms slightly to redirect her path.
Approved routes only.
They said. Heat gathered behind Marrow's eyes. The reaction lingered, not hers alone. It was the first sign of bleed, not a voice, not a message, but an involuntary seepage of the host's internal state into the shared field when her containment slipped. Further in, Clessari citizens moved through shared space with measured distance. Some met her gaze, multiple eyes reflecting her in fragments. Others turned away. The field flexed, tightened, released.
You're integrating well.
The escort said.
Composure matters.
Her quarters sat at the edge of the approved zone. The interior environment was controlled. The surfaces adapted as if sensing her thoughts. When the lighting calibrated to neutral, Marrow wondered what had triggered it.
Rest.
The escort said.
Acclimation continues tomorrow. You remain restricted to this quarter and approved corridor until escort clearance changes.
The door sealed with a soft final sound. The presence did not recede. Without external voices, it pressed closer. Ambient awareness filled the room, intimate and uninvited. Marrow lowered herself to the floor. Grief arrived without shape, heavy and dense. Her spine bowed under it. Images followed. Fractured. A gathering she didn't recognize. Voices overlapping and then breaking apart. Loss without context.
This is normal,
she said aloud. The room offered no correction. She lay back, limbs splayed, searching for herself inside the field, pressure built behind her thoughts, not intrusive, insistent, contained awareness pressed inward. Like someone on the other side of a barrier. Tapping. Marrow closed her eyes. The knocking continued. Chapter 2. The Cost of Hosting, Seilith. Seilith crossed the threshold into the care hall without slowing. The floor yielded beneath her steps, living to pressure, dimming where her weight passed. A low resonance lived in the space and refused to become sound. It pressed against her awareness, layered with strain that had accumulated over too many cycles. A caretaker waited near the entrance, hands folded, posture formal. Their luminescence held steady, controlled too tightly to be calm.
She's awake,
they said.
not settled.
Seilith inclined her head and moved past, her pace measured to avoid triggering the hall's containment responses. 6 alcoves lined the hall. 5 sat dark and empty, prepared but unused. The 6th pulsed with irregular light, brightness stuttering along the seams where memory sigils should have held a steady cadence. Yara sat on the low platform at the center, spine straight, hands resting on her knees as if placed there by instruction rather than instinct. Her mirrored eyes tracked nothing. The sigils along her shoulders flickered out of sequence, lighting and dimming like a field losing its rhythm. Seilith stopped a step away, noting the delayed synchronization between Yara's breathing and the hall's baseline resonance.
Yawa.
The name reached for her and slid off. Yara's gaze shifted and caught on Seilith's outline without recognition. Not confusion. Disconnection. A tremor traveled through Yara's fingers, small and constant. Seilith lowered herself to the floor, slow enough to signal restraint. She did not crowd. She opened her awareness in a narrow band enough to touch, not enough to overwhelm. The contact struck wrong. Yara's thought patterns fractured under Seilith's reach, not scattered, interfered with, a foreign cadence. Human mechanical logic disrupted the familiar rhythms of Clessari memory. Emotional spikes rose where none belonged, jagged and loud like bright pain with no lineage. Yara spoke without turning her head.
The sky doesn't end there,
she said. The words came shaped for air, not mind.
It keeps going. Cold.
Seilith closed her eyes for a breath. At the edge of the alcove, the caretaker shifted. Another took a step forward. Seilith lifted a hand. They stopped. She angled her body closer, aligning her breathing to the shared cadence she remembered from before. Not to pull Yara back by force, to offer a rhythm that could be held.
Stay here,
Seilith said. She anchored the thought instead of pushing it. Yara's shoulders eased a fraction. Seilith reached deeper, careful. She found fragments caught in Loop's images that did not belong. Straight-edged structures. Light without warmth. A horizon broken into rigid sections. Sounds that did not carry resonance, only vibration. The transfer hadn't just used Yara's body. It had left residue in the psychic weave. Yara's mouth moved again.
They call it a window.
Seilith placed her palm flat against the floor. She let the hall's resonance carry her signal outward, inviting shared memory toward them. Not to erase. to surround. A grounding ritual formed, slow, familiar, shared. Images of continuity passed gently from mind to mind. Sialith guided it with restraint, leaving space for Yara to grasp what she could. The interference resisted. Human language pushed through the weave in broken segments, phrases misaligned with Clessari structure, names without lineage, numbers without meaning. The ritual held, then faltered. Yara's breath hitched. Sialith tightened the circle, keeping it narrow and steady. The memory field stabilized enough for Yara to lean into it. Her eyes closed. The sigils along her shoulders dimmed, then brightened in sync, as if remembering how to return. A caretaker exhaled. The relief did not last. A surge cut through the field. Not violent. Wrong. An emotional spike with no anchor in Clessari experience. Sharp longing paired with fear. The sensation carried no context, no lineage, no location. Only pain that belonged to someone else and had been left behind like a stain. Sialith withdrew at once. Yara sagged forward, hands braced against the floor. The ritual collapsed, not with a break but with exhaustion. The caretakers moved in, guiding Yara back onto the platform with practiced ease. Their hands were gentle, their eyes were not. One of them spoke without lifting their gaze.
Reduced hosting suitability.
The phrase landed with weight. Sialith rose in one motion.
Say it again.
The caretaker's jaw tightened.
Flagged. Pending review.
Sialith held their gaze until their luminescence flickered, then turned away before the hall could register the sharpness of her thoughts. They called it flagged. She called it what it was, procedure shaped like exile. The council hall lay 3 corridors. Chapter 3, Memory Bleed, Marrow. Marrow woke before the light cycle shifted, not from sound, but from pressure. The telepathic field had thickened overnight, layering awareness until it pressed against the edges of her thoughts. It did not intrude. It waited. She lay still on the floor where she had slept. The body she wore registered strain as information and released it. No ache, no protest. A system that noted and advanced. She told herself that was good. The door parted without a sound. The escort stood in the opening, posture unchanged, attention fixed not on Marrow's face but on the pulse state of her wristband.
You are stable,
they said.
Residence participation has been approved. You will remain under escort. Do not address anyone directly, unless I prompt it.
Marrow pushed herself upright, movements careful.
Participation?
Observation is customary.
The escort replied.
Limited engagement permitted under guidance. Ambient field only.
Approved, permitted, guided, boundaries shaped into ethics. They walked through corridors as the settlement shifted into motion. Groups gathered and separated with fluid precision, spacing determined by resonance compatibility rather than preference. When Marrow's proximity caused subtle tension in the field, the architecture adjusted paths, widening or narrowing to redirect flow without confrontation. They reached the resonance field, a low circular expanse open to the air. No threshold marked its boundary. The field announced itself by sensation alone, a deepening hum beneath thought, pressure settling evenly across awareness.
You will remain shallow,
the escort said.
Do not reach. Ambient field only. If your band flashes amber, withdraw immediately.
I understand.
Inside, the ritual began without signal. Breath aligned, awareness softened at the edges, sliding toward cohesion. Marrow kept her mind narrow, counting the rise and fall of her chest, tracking the sensation of her feet against the living surface. Patterns surfaced, not memories, but structures. Loss folded into growth without rupture. Emotion passed through the field and dissolved into shared equilibrium. The field swelled. Pressure built faster than Marrow expected. Her instincts flared. Human. Instincts trained to respond to intensity with action. She did not plan to move. She reached anyway. The reaction was immediate. The field lurched, coherence snapping inward. Marrow's memories broke containment, not one image, but a scatter. Her sister's voice, a glass shattering, a phone vibrating on a counter. the rush down a hospital corridor, a shape outlined beneath a white sheet. The resonance collapsed. Warmth withdrew. Awareness snapped inward across the ring. Boundaries slamming shut. Someone cried out, not in sound but in rupture. A sudden jagged absence where cohesion had been. Marrow staggered as the field rejected her presence. Nausea surged. Hands caught her arms, steadying without comfort.
Withdrawal,
the escort said. The word carried force. One participant folded, luminescence flickering erratically. Attendants moved in, bodies interposing with practiced speed. The ritual dissolved into containment patterns, the field sealing itself against further disruption. Marrow stood frozen, heat flooding her face, shame burned, sharp and undeniable. I didn't...
This space is closed,
the escort said, already turning her away. Corridors sealed behind them as they moved, living surfaces tightening into guided channels. The settlement's awareness pulled back from her in coordinated withdrawal, not anger. Protection. In her quarters, Marrow sank against the wall. Images surfaced unbidden. A child's laughter with the wrong cadence. A hand she did not recognize brushing a surface she somehow knew. Grief surged, heavy, intimate, shared. The memories did not respond. They came jagged and intrusive, emotion without context. This was not resonance. This was bleed. She reported the incident through the interface. The system acknowledged receipt.
Temporary disorientation.
The response read,
First cycle sensitivity. Continue grounding protocols. Do not attempt directed contact.
Grounding changed nothing. That night she sat upright, spine rigid, hands planted flat on the floor. The telepathic field pulsed at the edges of her awareness. Pressure returned. Not a knock. A contour. Contained, deliberate, aware. Not the ambient field, not the crowd. A private line opened from the far side. Marrow swallowed and did not reach back. Chapter 4, What the Dome Hides, Salith. Salith waited for the exchange shift to turn. The dome never slept, but its monitoring rhythms loosened for a handful of breaths at the transition. Procedural slack mistaken, by those who benefited from it, for mercy. She moved when the field slackened towards the margin where Clessari design surrendered control. The air cooled. Resonance flattened. The living surfaces thinned, forced into obedience by geometry that did not listen. A technician waited in the service alcove, eyes lowered, hands already positioned near the panel.
You're late.
By design.
Salith slid a small device from sleeve to palm and pressed it against the wall. A status light blinked once, then dimmed.
Loop. Disabled. 3 minutes.
The technician said.
When the perimeter tightens, it will tighten everywhere. They'll feel it. You will too.
Salith did not answer. She stepped through. The understructure beneath the dome smelled human. Ozone scrubbed thin, coolant residue masked beneath sterilization. Metal hummed with constant use. The psychic field reduced to a monitored trace, enough to register motion, not enough to sustain resonance. She followed the maintenance corridor until a partial observation window split the wall. Inside, a host lay in a cradle, body slack, eyes open without focus. Awareness flickered at the edge of the field, fragmented and thin. Technicians moved around the platform with the efficiency of repetition. Re-entry attempt failed. Stabilize and log. The host's presence thinned, threads pulled apart and failed to reconnect. A technician disengaged the collar at the base of the neck. The body did not respond. Flag has failed re-entry, another said. Proceed. A proxy construct entered the control bay. Humanoid, human-shaped, its face modelled precisely after Dr. Calder's without the flaws of skin or fatigue. A hollow interface flared before it as consortium representatives resolved into view.
We've reviewed the dissociation uptick,
one said.
Your projections remain within acceptable variance.
The proxy inclined its head. Calder's voice carried through it, warm by design.
The data supports continuation.
And the losses?
The proxy did not hesitate.
Acceptable.
The word landed without friction. Calder continued, already moving past it.
Long-duration transfer is the next phase. Permanent displacement for voluntary cases only, with compensation.
Clessari consent remains valid?
The proxy's gaze flicked toward the chamber.
Legally sound.
Salith activated the recorder. Audio and visual feeds compressed into carryable proof. A warning pulse flickered along the corridor lights, then a second tighter, sharper. 30 seconds.
Proceed with cleanup,
Calder said. The proxy turned and exited. Salith slipped back into the corridor as the dome's internal security reasserted itself, not with sound, but with pressure. Monitoring fields tightened, seams brightened into clean, evaluative light. She did not slow until living architecture returned. The technician waited where she had left them, hands shaking once before they steadied.
Did you get it?
Salith nodded. The Aether chamber absorbed her. She projected the recording into shared space. Calder's voice filled the chamber. Acceptable. Outrage flared. Viral stepped forward.
We release this now.
If we do, they accelerate.
Salith said.
They already are.
This proof matters, but we need a human voice. One they can't dismiss as damaged by default.
Esho stepped into the center.
I authorized the threshold,
he said.
I chose survival over purity. Not the survival of one, the survival of all, and generations after. The bridge brings over more than consciousness. It brings power, resources, protection, things that without, our people will be extinguished. So we invited them into our home in order to keep it.
Salith did not ask out loud what the purpose of a home was when its occupants watched others strip it, and even its occupants, bare. But Salith was sure some of the thoughts seeped out. Esho's voice held. His hand tightened around the staff until the living material creaked, but he released it before anyone else could notice.
This death will be recorded as necessary. It will be mourned as ours. It will be cherished for its sacrifice.
Salith withdrew the projection. The dome hid nothing by force. It hid by procedure. Chapter 5. The line between witness and thief Marrow. Marrow stopped sleeping on the floor. When she reclined, memory shifted and boundaries softened in ways she could not predict. She stayed upright now, back against the wall, hands braced flat as if force alone could keep her intact. The telepathic field noticed her noticing it. She learned to shrink inside it, narrow focus. Breath counted. Attention folded inward until pressure thinned to something tolerable. The presence returned midway through the cycle. It felt like alignment, not the ambient pressure of the settlement, not the constant brush of nearby mines. This was deliberate, a line held thin and taut, touching only one point.
Who are you?
She said aloud. A shape formed at the edge of her awareness, not a name. A function. Host. Marrow swallowed.
I didn't choose you.
Neither did I. The thought arrived clean, without bleed, carrying the wrong kind of stillness beneath it. Images followed before she could brace. A care hall. Memory sigils out of sync. Salith's gravity anchoring a space around someone unraveling. Marrow gasped and severed the connection by force, clamping her awareness down until the line snapped. The ambient field returned, but her pulse did not. She reported herself. Unprompted contact. Bidirectional bleed. Host distress. Possible channel breach. The response arrived quickly.
You are exceeding authorized engagement parameters. Further involvement may compromise extraction integrity. You are restricted to escorted movement only until further notice.
Extraction. The escort arrived early the next cycle. Their posture held the rigidity of new instruction. They guided Marrow through corridors she had not accessed before, paths angling away from shared spaces, route lines brightening only when her wristband pulsed. They stopped at a seam, a hard restriction.
Do not cross,
the escort said.
Your band will not authorize re-entry.
Salith stood just beyond the non-entry zone for Marrow. Instead of touching mines, Salith spoke out loud.
You are bleeding.
I'm containing it.
Containing is not the same as causing no harm.
Salith's attention held like a blade.
You are told this is an observation, so you do not have to pay the cost.
Marrow's throat tightened.
That's not true.
What is mapped cannot be unmapped,
Salith said.
Stabilization does not restore. It prevents collapse.
Silence settled.
If you remain, you will be asked to choose.
Without another word, Salith turned, signaling the conversation was over. The escort guided Marrow away, unasked questions buzzing loudly in her brain. Chapter 6, The Breach. The Aether chamber had become a node of friction. The shared field held heat compressed, controlled. Salith stood at the center of the projection, dome under structure hovering like a cold ghost.
This is not protocol failure,
Salith said.
It is protocol. Permanent displacement is already being modeled.
Viral stepped forward.
Then we sever the transmission.
They send technicians,
Salith said.
They isolate hosts until compliance returns. We don't sever it, we poison it.
She indicated the recorder.
We use the bleed, not as data, as experience.
That will damage the traveler,
Viral said.
The traveler is already damaged.
Her awareness flicked toward Marrow. The plan required a physical breach. Soft restrictions redirected. Hard restrictions refused. The machinery sat behind seams. Salith reached across the field, projecting to all. Witnessing is theft, she projected. Action is payment. Salith reached directly to Marrow's mind. The difference between witness and accomplice is in what they do with the knowledge they possess. When Salith felt the feeble, untrained human mind try to reach back, she responded with a time and place.
The override requires a human biometric,
Salith said.
Private channel only.
Marrow placed her hand on the scanner.
Identify report.
Final observation.
Marrow said.
Subject. Systemic erosion.
The upload began. Then Salith reached into the transfer stream. Grief aligned with structure. Experience threaded through audit paths. The siren was psychic.
Extraction initiated,
the system announced. Pressure slammed down. Doors sealed, lights flared white, the private channel remained open. Salith stood still.
Go,
she said.
Tell them what we carried.
Chapter 7, The Weight of Carrying Marrow. Marrow learned how to listen without reaching. It required more discipline than silence ever had. She let awareness pass through her without anchoring, without reflex, without the instinctive tightening that had once followed every shift in the field. The Clessari body adapted quickly, muscles aligning, balance settling, breath smoothing into patterns that matched the ambient resonance. The system rewarded containment with stability. The presence remained. It held itself at the edge of her mind like a thought deliberately unfinished. It did not press. It did not withdraw. It waited. After the breach, the settlement changed its posture toward her. Roots that had once softened ahead of her stride now hesitated. The line of light that unfurled from her wristband narrowed. As if the architecture had learned to ration what it granted. She felt it in the way surfaces stiffened under her palm, in the way corridor curvature pulled her away from gatherings before she could choose whether to pass through them. Security attention did not speak. It evaluated. She counted breaths anyway. 4 in. Hold. 4 out. Hold. She held herself narrow and quiet inside the field and did not mistake that for safety. Salith reached her directly for the first time after the breach. Not through the shared field, not through proximity. The contact arrived narrow and precise. A private channel opened and sealed with intent.
You should not be carrying this alone.
The words landed without emotion, shaped to avoid bleed. Marrow did not answer at once. She adjusted her stance instead, feet braced against the living floor as it shifted subtly beneath her, smoothing her posture into something less conspicuous. The settlement had entered a containment rhythm, roots redirecting, surfaces stiffening where she passed, pressure tightening and releasing in controlled pulses. Images followed, not imposed, but offered. A council chamber under strain, presences arranged in formal layers, discipline held so tight it read as stillness. Proof circulating through the ring compressed and sharp, a recording's cold voice, a hollowed host's blank stare, numbers pinned to outcomes. Calder's recorded tones slid through the memory like a calm hand pressing down on a wound.
Acceptable variance.
Anger rippled across the shared field and broke against discipline. It did not erupt. It did not resolve. It held. Marrow remained still. She let the weight pass through rather than lodge. She felt how the Clessari body absorbed emotion, not as release but as endurance. No venting, no collapse, just accommodation. The nervous system receiving, cataloguing and moving forward without permission from comfort. This is how they survive, she realized. The understanding offered no comfort. She returned to the dome's sanctioned routines the next cycle as if she had not breached anything. She attended briefings. She answered check-ins with steady language. She let technicians read her vitals and nod at her, and she watched the way their attention slid away the moment the numbers stopped alarming. The program did not need belief. It needed compliance that looked like calm. That was the hinge, not what she felt, but what she could keep from showing. She requested access to the archival lattice under the justification of acclamation review. The request sat in the system longer than usual, long enough to feel like a hand on her shoulder, keeping her still while someone decided whether she was worth stopping. Approval came. No escort assigned. Either the system assumed compliance, or it had already decided the outcome. The lattice chamber lay beneath the settlement, its threshold marked by absence rather than structure. The corridor leading to it narrowed and stripped itself of the subtle guiding warmth that had once been constant. The living walls withdrew into a state of rest, surfaces losing their responsiveness, as if the architecture itself did not want to acknowledge her passage. When she crossed the threshold, the telepathic field cut clean. Silence struck hard. Marrow staggered and caught herself against the wall, breath loud in her ears. The Clessari body did not panic, but her human mind did, grasping for the pressure of shared awareness that had become constant. The lack of it felt like amputation, like losing a limb she hadn't known she'd grown. She waited until the dizziness passed. She pressed her palm to the wall until her balance settled into the Clessari body's steadiness. Then the lattice activated. Memory nodes flared into existence around her, suspended in ordered arrays that shifted with internal logic. The room had no ornament and no ceremony, no markers of honor, no ritual architecture, just structure, just storage. Accounting. Marrow walked between the nodes as if moving through a ledger. Each node held compressed experience. Cycles of hosting, consent affirmations, neurological drift, recovery metrics, and a secondary layer of notes coded in dome language annotations made for human eyes. She filtered the array. She isolated the markers flagged failed re-entry. The first node unfolded. A host entered transfer, aligned and stable. Consent affirmation confirmed, signature locked. The human consciousness disengaged cleanly at cycle end. The Clessari awareness did not follow. It fractured rhythm breaking under incompatible cadence. Identity threads slipped, then tore. A pause in the sequence where a recovery protocol should have initiated. No response. The system logged irreversible destabilization and moved on. The second node carried less coherence. Memory noise overwhelmed structure. Emotional content flattened into static. The host remained alive, responsive, incapable of integration, present enough to breathe, absent enough to be used. A marker in the margins read, stabilization adequate. Hosting suitability reduced. Procedure shaped like exile. Marrow's stomach tightened. The Clessari body registered the spike and stabilized her breathing without permission from panic. The third node showed an attempted re-entry correction. A technician's calm voice instructing, a collar adjusting, the host's nervous system forced into alignment by pressure pulses. The sequence ended with a blank space where connection should have resumed. The fourth held a different failure. Memory displaced but not severed, leaving a host trapped in loops of human imagery that did not belong. Rigid corridors, white lights, the sterile hum of machines. A human voice saying her name. Wrong name, Wrong cadence again and again. By the fifth node, Marrow's hands shook. She closed it and leaned into the central column, breath shallow, pulse racing. The Clessari body absorbed the stress without complaint. That steadiness frightened her more than breakdown would have. If she could endure this without collapsing, she could be kept inside it longer. She could be made useful through endurance alone. They endure until endurance fails, she thought. And when it fails, the system logs it and continues. The present stirred at the edge of her mind. This space is not meant for you.
I know,
Marrow said aloud. Her voice sounded too loud in the silence, too human. You carry it anyway? Marrow did not argue. Arguing would imply she believed there was a clean way out. She selected specific nodes, those with the clearest sequence alignment, those with the least ambiguity. She chose the ones that paired consent language with outcomes that contradicted it, the ones that made minimal risk read like a lie told in a polite voice. She compressed the data into a portable lattice shard. It formed as a small, dense structure against her palm, pulsing faintly, memory pressing outward, just enough to sting. A replication warning flashed along the chamber's interface: unauthorized duplication, protocol violation, review pending. The system recorded the theft. It did not stop it. Finalization completed with a soft internal click, like a door sealing. When she exited the chamber, the telepathic field rushed back around her, relief tangled with intrusion. The settlement registered her return immediately. Security attention surged, not to crush, but to contain. Corridor lights snapped from soft guidance to harsh evaluation. Route lines pulsed brighter beneath her feet, narrowing their path options. Doors hesitated before opening, as if the architecture had to confirm her authorization twice. A corrective pulse pressed behind her eyes, hard enough to make her blink. She did not slow. She moved with the line's timing. Stop where your band darkens, proceed when it pulses. Comply with the choreography they designed, and they would let her move. Salith waited at the boundary of an approved corridor, where living architecture ended and the hard seam began. No escort. No mediation. The absence of supervision carried weight. Either the system had already decided Marrow was leaving, or it was testing how far she would go without being physically stopped.
You accessed restricted memory,
Salith said.
Yes.
Salith's luminescence held steady, but the shard's pulse made it flare at the edges despite her control.
This will not stop them,
Salith said.
It will force acceleration.
I know, but it removes plausible denial.
Marrow's fingers curled around the shard until the sting sharpened, grounding her in pain that belonged to her hand and not to the field. Salith studied her, attention sharp and unsparing.
You are still human,
she said.
Your testimony will be weighted differently.
They'll remove me,
Marrow said.
Quietly, if possible.
And if not?
Publicly.
Salith inclined her head.
Then we decide whether that serves us.
No alliance, no reassurance. A tremor rippled through the settlement. Security attention surged in response, corrective pulses, snapping into alignment. The tightening manifested as the ambient field compressing into a narrow band, harder to breathe inside, harder to think, without being noticed. Corridors dimmed, routes redirected, doors sealed and reopened in new sequences, forcing bodies into different flows. The system had registered an anomaly, unauthorized access, altered data load, irregular movement patterns.
They're locking routes,
Marrow said.
Yes, this is expected,
Salith replied. The shared field tightened, no longer curious. Evaluative. Containing.
You cannot stay,
Salith said.
I know.
You cannot lead this, and you cannot undo it.
I know.
Salith stepped back, presence withdrawing with intention, the private channel sealing itself as cleanly as it had opened.
We move without you. That is the cost of your clarity.
Marrow did not ask where, or how. The approved exit corridor opened ahead, sterile and stripped of resonance. Human geometry reclaimed the space in clean lines and transparent barriers. Her wristband pulsed once. then again, an insistence. Proceed. Marrow walked. Witness was not passive. It required weight. And it did not center the one who carried it. Behind her, the settlement adjusted, sealing pathways, redistributing attention, recalibrating leadership structures. Decisions took shape without her presence. Ahead, the boundary thinned. Marrow did not slow. Chapter 8. What Remains Unreturned, Marrow. The corridor to the exit did not acknowledge her. That was the first difference Marrow noticed. No softening of surfaces, no recalibration of pressure as she passed. The architecture held its geometry without response, a refusal shaped as neutrality. The living material that had once listened to proximity now treated her like a chair, present, irrelevant, not worth adapting to. She had learned enough to read it. The settlement was done accommodating her. An escort waited at the final threshold, posture precise, attention fixed on the interface embedded in the wall. Their wristband glowed with a new authorization color, and the route line beneath their feet was brighter than hers, the system reminding Marrow who could move freely and who could not.
Early extraction,
they said.
Reassignment approved. You will remain under escort until the cradle seals.
Reassignment. The word slid into the space where guest had once lived and made it sound like a lie told politely. Marrow nodded. The agreement felt less like consent now and more like choreography. Stop, stand, proceed, be moved. Behind her, the telepathic field gathered with quiet focus. No panic, no accusation, just attention, braided and deliberate. It pressed along her spine the way Clessari presence aligned when a decision had already been made. She did not turn. The door opened. The exchange chamber looked unchanged. Cradles stood in ordered rows. Interfaces glowed, patient and ready. Transparent partitions kept bodies separated by inches that mattered. Technicians moved with practiced economy, eyes trained on data streams rather than faces. Their movements had the smoothness of routine, but tension sat beneath it like a thin wire stretched taut across the room. A status display above the central platform scrolled. Transfer schedule adjusted. Review pending. Stability metrics prioritized. Dr. Calder stood near the platform, coat immaculate, expression composed. He looked for a moment at the status display before he looked at her, as if aligning his tone with what the system required.
Marrow,
he said.
This is becoming a habit.
You approved it,
she said.
I corrected a deviation.
His gaze flicked to her wristband.
You were restricted. You breached.
His voice stayed warm. The words did not. Marrow stepped onto the platform. The Clessari body resisted, not fear, but recognition. A subtle tightening through muscles and joints. A reflexive recoil from the cradle's contour, as if her tissues remembered pressure. Security lived in her now as a memory of constraint. Calder saw it.
Transfer fatigue,
he said.
It passes.
You know it doesn't,
Marrow replied. A technician to the left, Lena Ortiz paused with her hand hovering above a control panel, eyes darting to Calder, then away. Calder did not correct her. He did not need to. The room corrected itself through hesitation. Marrow drew the lattice shard from her sleeve. The escort shifted. A small movement. Weight transferring, hand angling toward an override plate on the platform's edge. Marrow's wristband pulsed amber once. Stop. She did not. She pressed the shard against the interface. The system accepted it without pause. Her biometric authorization was enough. The private report line did not ask whether the content was permitted. It asked only whether the traveler was cleared to submit. A status marker flashed. Observer report, secure channel, logged. Calder's attention sharpened.
That data is restricted.
Its record?
Marrow said.
It is not within your scope.
You built the scope,
she interrupted. Voice steady because steadiness was the only weapon she had that the system still recognized as legitimate.
You just assumed I wouldn't use it.
The interface bloomed. Memory nodes unfolded across the display. Not summaries, not metrics alone. Sequences aligned, Failed re-entries paired with consent affirmations. Neurological drift mapped against recovery claims. Duration extensions layered over erosion curves. The clean language of minimal risk sat beside images of hollowed minds and called itself stability. The room changed. A technician swallowed hard. Another looked away. A third stared at the display as if looking directly at it might implicate them, as if turning away might implicate them more. Calder exhaled slowly.
This will not dismantle the bridge.
I know.
It will not end the program.
I know.
His gaze held hers, calculation visible now, stripped of warmth.
Then what do you believe you're accomplishing?
Marrow placed her palm against the cradle. The surface warmed in response, adaptive and intimate, as if mistaking her touch for trust.
I'm returning what you separated,
she said. The telepathic field surged not into the chamber, but into her. Presence aligned with intent, not a breach, an opening. She felt Salith's structure at the edge of awareness, precise and contained. Others gathered behind her, layered and deliberate, not to protect Marrow, not to rescue her, to witness what she was about to do and to decide later whether it served them. The weight settled. Memory did not bleed. It transferred. Grief unfolded with clarity. Loss carried without collapse. Endurance shaped into continuity. The cost made visible without distortion. Not a metaphor. Not a file. It was experience, pressed into the same channel the dome used for calm reports. The system failed to translate it cleanly. It did not matter. Meaning carried force on its own. A technician's hand shook. Another pressed their lips together, eyes fixed on the display as if it accused them personally. Another took one involuntary step back from the cradle, then froze, as if stepping farther would cross an invisible line. Calder's voice cut sharp.
Disconnect her.
The technicians hesitated. Not long. Long enough. Marrow opened fully. The shard's contents streamed outward. The private channel remained open because she was authorized to report. The report was no longer a report. It was an insertion of burden into a system designed to consume empathy as sanitized product. Calder moved closer, lowering his voice as if quiet could contain what the room had already received.
You are compromising an active program.
You built the compromise into it,
Marrow said.
I'm only removing the insulation.
The escort's hand hovered over the override plate. A second amber pulse flashed on Marrow's band. Stop. She met Calder's eyes.
You can shut this down,
she said.
But you can't return what's been taken.
The presence pressed closer, not protection. Confirmation. Calder studied her, his assessment adjusting in real time. He did not look angry. He looked like someone recalculating a cost.
You will be removed,
he said.
Quietly, if possible.
Yes, I know,
Marrow replied. The admission did not feel brave. It felt like stepping into a consequence she had already accepted the moment she took the shard. Calder turned his head slightly. A technician someone Marrow did not know, flinched, and then obeyed, fingers moving over the controls with the speed of practiced compliance. The extraction sequence initiated. The cradle sealed. Pressure aligned. Interfaces synchronized to her nervous system. The field thinned as the bridge activated, converting resonance into a controlled stream. The settlement end released its grip and the chamber reclaimed authority, clinical light, mechanical hum, human design insisting it was in control. Salith's presence brushed hers once, brief, exact. You carried it. Marrow let the words settle. The world folded. Motion without direction. Awareness scattered, reassembled. Then wait. Air tore into her lungs. Pain flared where none should exist. Her human body arched against restraints, unfamiliar and raw. Her throat burned. She swallowed and tasted salt. Hands steadied her. Voices cut through haze.
Easy. You're back.
The room resolved into straight lines and muted color. Medical lights glared overhead. The hum of machines replaced resonance. A monitor beeped with indifferent regularity, each sound a reminder that this world did not carry her the way the field had. It did not hold her. It measured her. A clinician leaned over her, face masked, eyes trained on her vitals.
Breathe,
they said, and the command felt different in a world where breath was private again. Marrow turned her head, searching for Calder. He stood near the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, posture composed. He did not approach the bed. He watched like a person watching a piece of equipment, returning a result.
Did it transmit?
Marrow asked, her voice scraped. There was a pause, not because they didn't know, because they were deciding what to admit.
Yes,
someone said at last. The answer carried caution. Calder, quieter, added,
Long-duration transfers are suspended. Pending review.
Suspended. Not ended. Marrow closed her eyes. Even here, the language was procedural. A suspension meant a restart. A review meant a revision of optics. A protocol reassessment meant new thresholds, new consent forms, new phrases designed to reassure without specifying. Marrow's body trembled once, then steadied. Later, outside the facility, the sky stretched flat and empty. No pressure. No shared awareness. Silence pressed harder than the field ever had. It did not tap. It did not align. It simply existed, indifferent to whether she could carry it. News feeds cycled through measured language. Ethical concerns raised. Internal investigation launched. Partnership reaffirmed. Safeguards strengthened. Compensation models under review. A clip showed Calder speaking to cameras. Expression earnest, tone calm. He did not deny the program's value. He did not deny the costs. He promised.
Improvements.
A word that meant adjustments, not reversals. A line at the bottom of the screen read, Bridge operations continue under modified guidelines. Modified. Not dismantled. Not closed. Marrow watched protests gather at the facility gate, small then swelling. Placards lifted, chants rising, security barriers forming. She watched statements issued by the consortium, careful and vague. She watched a committee announced, names listed, timelines promised. The system moved. It absorbed. It adjusted. It persisted. Marrow turned away from the screens and walked. At night, in her apartment, she felt the absence where the presence had been. Not loss, space. The echo of resonance still existed in her nerves, a phantom pressure along her spine that made the quiet feel too sharp. She did not try to fill it. In the morning, she found an official message waiting in her inbox. The tone was polite. The language was clean. Reassignment confirmed. Counseling resources available. Non-disclosure terms attached. A line near the end read, Thank you for your participation in advancing mutual understanding. Mutual. Understanding. Words designed to close the shape of the story into something marketable. She deleted the message. Another arrived the next day. Different sender, same tone. A reminder, then a warning, then a notice that her access credentials had been revoked. Removed. Quietly. As promised. By the end of the week, the feed had new headlines. Bridge operations resume in limited capacity. Enhanced monitoring deployed. Consent lattices updated. Host recovery initiatives announced. A new name for the same thing. A new layer of insulation. Marrow read the updates and understood, with the clarity she could not unlearn, what Salith had meant. Some things could not be returned. That was not absolution. It was residue. Marrow walked into the unresonant world, carrying what had been left with her, and leaving the rest to continue. Altered. Enduring. Unresolved.
I didn't set out to write a political story. I set out to write about what it feels like to try to do the right thing and still lose your place in the world. I am a first-generation American. My father became a U.S. citizen long before I was born. He followed every rule that was put in front of him. Classes, paperwork, compliance, decades of paying taxes, staying out of trouble. He built a life here in good faith. Now he is older, living with dementia, and increasingly vulnerable. In the current climate, the fear that he could be picked up, processed, or disappear into a system that no longer recognizes him as a person is not theoretical to me. It's not something I debate. It's something I carry. That fear of doing everything right and still being expendable is the emotional core of this story. At the same time, I live with a deep attachment to the culture my family comes from. I love it. It shaped how I understand music, community, humor, grief, and survival. But I've also watched versions of that culture be diluted, repackaged, and celebrated without being protected. I've seen creative practices born from marginalized communities dismissed as immoral or dangerous, until someone in power finds a way to make them profitable. Steel drum music, hip-hop, even marijuana. The sequence is familiar. Moral judgment first, adoption later. By the time something is embraced, the people who created it are often no longer centered in its meaning or its benefits. That contradiction doesn't just frustrate me, it wears on me. What bothers me most isn't only the theft, it's the flattening. When culture is stripped of its history and its people, it becomes easier to consume and easier to control. The parts that once gave it strength are softened or removed. Over time, everything starts to feel interchangeable, and the human experience loses texture. Less friction, less risk, less truth. I wrote What Remains Unreturned to explore what happens when help becomes extraction, when acknowledgement replaces responsibility, and when systems respond to harm by adjusting just enough to continue. Marrow lives in a position I understand well, the witness who is not a savior. She isn't pure or heroic. She isn't the center of the harm, but she's close enough to it that she can't pretend she doesn't see what's happening. When she acts, she loses her place. She can't remain with the Clessari because the story isn't about her sacrifice, and centering her would distort who is actually being harmed. But she also can't fully return to human society, because once you see how institutions absorb truth without changing, it becomes hard to participate in their narratives the same way. What Marrow loses is something the system never names. She loses belonging. That loss is personal to me. I don't fit cleanly into ideological categories or cultural expectations, even within communities I care deeply about. I believe allies matter. I believe cross-cultural solidarity matters. But I also believe that doing the right thing doesn't guarantee safety, acceptance, or resolution. Sometimes it only brings clarity, and clarity can be isolating. Science fiction was the only form that could hold this story honestly. If I had written it as realism, the roles would have collapsed into something familiar and rigid. The story would have been read through binaries, heroes and villains, solutions and victories. Science fiction creates space, not to dilute the truth, but to let readers encounter it without immediately deciding where they stand. It allows people to see themselves in Marrow, in Salith, even in Calder, before judgment takes over. I don't believe systems collapse easily. I believe they adapt. They acknowledge harm. They change language. They introduce safeguards, committees, revised guidelines, and then they continue. That belief comes partly from my background in sociology, but mostly from watching it happen in real life. That's why the story refuses closure. When it ends, nothing has been fixed. The system persists. The question isn't whether Marrow succeeded. It's what it costs to tell the truth in a world that knows how to absorb it. I want readers to sit with that discomfort, to feel what lingers after the story ends, to recognize that not knowing whether things change doesn't release us from responsibility. This isn't a story about saving the world. It's a story about carrying what the world refuses to return. And I'm the one who needed to write it because I know what it means to live between systems, to love cultures that are consumed without being protected.
Professional audiobooks in a click.
Spoken.